What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Frequency Podcast. I'm your host, Frankie J. Lopez. Hope you're all doing well. Before we get into it, please follow the podcast page, allow for notifications, rate the podcast. Also follow me on social media at Frequency Studios _ on Instagram and at Frequency Studios on TikTok. Consistent content, including a few album reviews that don't make the podcast. We got an alright one today. Kaytraminé's self-titled debut album. Kaytraminé, the newly formed group consisting of American rapper Amine and Haitian-Canadian producer and DJ Kaytraminé. Amine, a rapper who broke through with mainstream success with his debut single, Caroline, back in 2016. Since then, dropping a handful of albums over the years that have garnered him a cult following of sorts, with his brand of alternative style hip-hop, his most recent project, Limbo, releasing to critical acclaim back in 2020. Not to be outdone, Kaytraminé has been a force in the dance and electronic music game since his 2016 debut, 99.9%. That, along with his sophomore effort, Bubba, has solidified Kaytraminé as one of the most sought-after DJs, and rightfully so with his unique blend of soul, R&B, and house that has stood the test of time, and paved the way for others following in his footsteps on the mainstream stage. The formation of this group has been the talk of the town for some time now, since the announcement of this debut album, which came alongside the debut single Forever back in April. Off the back of this debut single, many came to believe that the duo was going to bring the summer album of the year, and for good reason. Forever is fantastic and absolutely embodies the summertime essence. The colorful bounce, the Pharrell vocals on the hook, a must play at the beach or for the DJ set at some random New York City rooftop. Amine brings energy and humor, mostly catching a vibe with a woman and self-boasting. This, along with the second single, Rebuke, had me truly looking forward to this album being the upbeat soundtrack that we need. Love the Trina Broussard background vocal sample, the soulful strumming guitar, the singing on the hook. It also has some of these uplifting lyrics about wanting peace, moving on from pain. I wish it wasn't so short, but still feels like watching a sunset. But unfortunately, I think the expectations of immaculate vibes from this album kind of plays into the downfall of it, sadly. And regardless of those expectations, I think the results themselves are underwhelming. This album was clearly aiming to be a summer soundtrack, and whether that means coming through with danceable club vibes or laid-back moments, it doesn't really fully check any of those boxes thoroughly or consistently. Take the opener, Who He Is, which should lay the groundwork for the album. Kind of falls flat out the gate. I want to like it more, but it just really isn't that fun to listen to. The positives, I think the production is solid, which in and of itself is usually the saving grace for most of these tracks. We get these electronic synths splattered on here with this nice piano and drum pattern. Amine, like on much of this album, has a great flow, boasting about how he's the shit, people wanting to know him, some clever lines here and there. But from a technical perspective, the hook isn't too distinguished from the verses, and sort of surprised me as the portion of the track that was meant to stick with me. And Amine isn't necessarily a lyrical machine on this project, nor does he need to be. And although I appreciate the personality he brings on here, he is completely lacking in the energy needed to keep me engaged into what he's saying, especially down the stretch of the track list, like the track STFU3, where the verses are starting to feel copy and paste. I gotta admit though, that Rachel Nichols bar was funny to me. The hook on is lazy and honestly just corny, and those performances are unfortunate given I like what Kaytraminé is doing on the beats here, both with some cool vocal effects, ad-libs, and the track I just mentioned featuring this dope heavy synth. But not to say that the production is never a sore spot either. Early on, the track Westside is a culmination of both these guys not bringing their best. I love Kaytraminé using the Bollywood sample, but the usage itself is not very creative. It's an uninteresting loop. And Amine's hook goes in one ear and out the other. No pop, no life. It just comes and goes. For the most part, features save the monotony that Amine occasionally brings. And interestingly, Amine and Kaytraminé tend to bring their A game when more folks are in the room. Like the track Let's Talk About It with Freddie Gibbs, who adds personality. But we also get these ascending chime-like synths against this Clips vocal sample that just puts you in a trance. Groovy hook with a falsetto on the ad-libs, that's a nice contrast to the subdued beat. Big Sean's verse on Master P is solid, but what I really like is the vocal sample loop, while Amine discusses how far he came to get where he is. Sauce Up is one of the stickiest hooks on the album with this Afrobeat style instrumental. The verses are forgettable though, including Amari's, but the track accomplishes what it needs to from a sonic perspective. And speaking of forgettable features, Snoop Dogg could have been better on I. The track is an attempt to bring some depth into the album, but it just doesn't strike that chord for me. Amine talks about his come up, not only in his craft, but emotionally. And Snoop comes in with talking about someone in his life who he seems to have wronged and wants to work things out with. Perhaps I'm just not that bought into these topics at this point of the album. Perhaps the writing is just too surface level for me. Maybe it's the lack of energy. In any case, it just doesn't hit as hard as I think they wanted it to. And this leads into the closer K&A that unfortunately carries that same sentiment for me. I think the hook is wonderful. Aminé talking about being true to yourself, not seeking validation, but he doesn't really touch on that topic as heavily as I'd like in the verses, with some intriguing bars, but there's a tendency to zone in and out on this 5-minute long track. The soulful vocal sample and transition gives this grand closing atmosphere, but I wish Aminé did something a bit more interesting with it. Now, I don't question the quality of this project. There are tracks I'd return to for the hooks, the flows, the fun production. However, it's hard not to admit that sometimes things just sound phoned in. And the results are a few summertime playlist additions, but far from something that I can throw on from front to back. This one's a 6 for me. Those are my thoughts. Do you agree? Do you think I'm crazy? DM me on social media and let me know. Also, let me know what you'd like me to review next. Until next time, I will see y'all later.